This is J. Krishnamurti's fourth public talk in Paris, 1969.
It's a strange phenomenon that man throughout the world has broken up life into fragments. There is the political field separate from the religious field, which is completely apart from the daily living, which again is completely different from the family life. And this fragmentation of life, as we and they, me and you, the nationalistic, the racial, tribal differences, when you observe all this right throughout the world, one wonders how it has happened. Why man does insist in living in fragments when life is this vast phenomenon of living, loving, and dying. Why? We cannot take the whole thing totally and live completely without any fragmentation. Why? There is always this duality, the good and the bad, love and hate, God and the devil, beauty and ugliness. Why we persist in living in different cages, traps, and this division has created a great deal of confusion in life. And whether it is at all possible to live without this confusion of contradiction, opposition, resistance, security and insecurity. Why this constant struggle between what is and what should be? I think it would be worthwhile if we could this morning see for ourselves if we can live without any division. The office and the family, the holiday and the job, the painter with his particular little field of expression, the scientist with his laboratory, new discoveries. If we could find out, and I think it is very important this, if we could this morning, see that it is, if it is at all possible to live wholly, and each action complete in relation to the whole, each action which doesn't contradict yesterday's action, or a continuance, a repetition of yesterday. Something that contains all the continuation of a total movement of life. If we could find such an action, never broken up, complete in the totality of every action, then we will be extraordinary human beings. We will be not only at peace with ourselves, but also with our neighbor, with the world, with the gods, with the skies and the trees and the beauty of the world. And to find out such action of great beauty, one must look at this whole phenomenon of existence, living, whatever that may mean, loving, with all the torture of love, and dying with all the fear that it entails. To see this vast existence as a whole, and live as a whole, and act in relation to the totality of this perception. Then man will have no awe. For every war, whether in Vietnam or in the near Middle East, each one of us is responsible. Not just the Americans, but each Frenchman, each Englishman, Indian and Russian, who have all the rest of it. Each one of us is responsible because our life is a way of war, a way of conflict. We have chosen that. We have accepted that. And if we would have peace, and obviously one must have in order to live, to love, and to die, to live in great ecstasy, not verbally merely, but actually. One must have peace and freedom. Those two go together always. Freedom is the understanding of this total existence, not a particular fragmentation of it. And in the understanding of this whole existence, there comes peace. And it seems to me it is of vast importance for human beings to find out, not verbally, intellectually, or as an ideal, but actually in daily life, in the office, in the kitchen, when you're walking along in a wood or in the bus, washing dishes or driving a car, or when you're talking to another, to have this feeling of totality, to have this extraordinary sense of beauty and life in which there is no division whatsoever. As the me and the you and we and they, the God and the devil, the opposites, be free of all that. Then only one can live totally and completely at peace with oneself and therefore with the world. And to understand this peace and freedom, and to live it actually in daily life, not as a theory, a principle, an ideal, a purpose. One must look at what actually life is. Look at the fact of what love is, and also understand completely what is implied in dying. So we are concerned with fact, with actually what is, not with what should be or the ideal. The ideal is an escape from what is. The ideal is the opposite of what is. And when you have an opposite of what is, there must be conflict. And when you are confronted only with what is, then there is no conflict whatsoever. The idealist is really a man who brings conflict because he's playing a double game, trying to be what he is not. And if we could look at this life, how we have fragmented it, broken it up, which is a fact. Because we are different when we are by ourselves, with our secret hopes, desires, frustrations, agonies, despairs, ambitions, cruelties, and violence. When we are with others, we put on a mask of hypocrisy. And when we are in the office, we are competitive, brutal. We destroy each other in the office. And at home, we come back and say, I love you. In the business world, you know what is happening better than I do, probably. How we are competitive, destructive, putting the other aside in order to gain a few coins. And at home, we hold hands with the wife or with the children. With one hand we destroy, with the other hand we caress. That's our life. That's the actual fact of living. Divided into Frenchmen, Germans, Hindus, Russians, religiously Catholic, Protestant, Hindu, Muslim, and that. Politically, sovereign governments with their armies and navies and vested interest in killing, encouraging violence, and yet at the same time talking politically of peace. Be strong in order to have peace. This has been the game that has been played for 1,000,000 years and more, keeping everything separate. And so the inevitable question arises to any serious man, and it's only the serious man that lives, not the man who is seeking entertainment, political, religious, or philosophical. With such a man who is serious, this question must inevitably arise, whether he can live completely every day, every minute of his life, so that there is no fragmentation and therefore no conflict. If it also your question and you are asking, then perhaps you and the speaker can go together in finding out how to live in this world, not as monks, not as hermits or as freaks, belonging to this world and that world, the hippie world and the bourgeois world and this and that and all the rest of their divisions. If we could go together and look at this phenomenon of life. First, what is this living that we call living? Actually, not what it should be. Please, let's be very clear on this issue. The what should be, the ideal, is fictitious, has no reality whatsoever. A man who is violent, brutal, he may have the principle or the ideal of non-violence, wanting to be peaceful, which is the opposite of what he is. Why should he have the opposite at all? What is more important is what is, which is he is violent. But he hopes through an ideal of non-violence, he can somehow manage to get rid of his violence. Is that so? Is not the ideal of non-violence when a man is violent an escape from actually what is? It is a pretension on his part, a sense of hypocrisy, when he says, I am practicing non-violence. And he will achieve, probably according to himself, ultimate state of non-violence when he is about ready to die. In the meantime, his activities are violent, mischievous. So the idealist is really a very dangerous person, because he is responsible for the continuation of conflict, of evasion, of hypocrisy. So we are concerned in our examination and observation with what is, and therefore not with any ideal, any principle, or with anything that is fictitious, unreal. So we are examining actually what is our living. And from there find out what is our living. The daily living, which we call life. What is it actually? It is a constant battle to survive in a world where everybody is fighting each other. It's a battle between oneself and another. It's a conflict in oneself and with another, in which each one is seeking his own particular security and denying the security of another. Each one is afraid, anxious, in despair, in loneliness. His activities are self-centered, going round himself everlastingly with his own problems. He lives with the image of himself, what he thinks he should be. And he has an image of another. The wife has an image of the husband, and the husband has an image of the other, or the boy, friend, and girl, and all the rest of it. This form of relationship between images is called intimacy, love. And this relationship between the images not only breeds constant separation, constant entanglement, in all relationship. Again, this is what we are looking at is fact. The man goes to the office, works there, and there he has a separate image of himself. Or if he is an artist, he has a particular concept of himself. When he comes home, he has a different image in his relationship with wife or with boy or girl. So all relationship actually is based on this images, symbols, ideas, memories. And this we call relationship. The relationship between an image and an image. And We have chosen war as the way of life. And yet, all of us want to live peacefully. And in all this living, there are flashes of joy, an intimation of something greater, something extraordinarily immense. But that's merely a flash, soon forgotten, or if it is remembered, you want more of it. Therefore, the memory of that continues, but the reality is gone. And in all this living, there is strife, misery, confusion, sorrow, and never-ending problems. Sexual, psychological, religious problems. And one could go more and more into detail of all this, which is unnecessary. But one can see actually in one's own mind and one's own heart how we live. With sorrow and fear, with pleasure and pain. And this is what we call living. Then, in this living, there is that strange thing called love. I wonder what that word means. Or the feeling behind that word. To us, love is pain. Love is a torture of despair, loneliness, jealousy. In love, there is attachment. And being attached, there's always the fear of not being able to possess, dominate, control. And so the attachment grows more and more strong between two people, between their husband, wife, and there is this terrible attachment to each other. And when there is any threat to that attachment, there is fear, there is jealousy, anxiety, anger, hate. And in this attachment, there's really a great sense of loneliness, separateness, isolation. Please do observe all this, not merely hear a few words, but actually see what is going on in your own mind and heart, and you will find out. If you are not aware of it, as we are discussing, talking about it, when you leave the hall, you won't understand a thing of what has been said. But if you would look at yourselves through the words, then you will see for yourself how deeply attached we are. Attached to a belief, to a formula, to a person, to a memory. And in this attachment, because there is in it pain, we say we must be detached. Again, the opposite of attachment, which again becomes another struggle, another pain. But one never asks, why does one attach oneself at all? Does love mean attachment? Does love mean possession, domination, exercising one will upon another? And there must be this attachment as long as there is self-isolated activity. Because look at it. In the office, you are ambitious. Office, in the factory, everywhere there is ambition, drive to succeed, to become this and that. And can an ambitious man love? Can you? Ambitious inwardly, socially, want to be famous, be somebody in this stupid world, and at the same time say to the boy or the girl or the husband or the wife, I love you. Can you? Is not the ambitious man thinking about himself, wanting to be somebody, isolating in his activities. How can he have any form of relationship with another? Can a man who is competitive, out for himself, and the whole society is based on that, can such a man honestly say to another that he loves? And can there be love when each one of us is caught in conflict, in confusion, in wanting to be separate? And in this question of love, there is this problem of sex, which apparently is something the modern world has just discovered. Because they're endlessly talking about it. Every magazine, every picture, everything is something as though sex has suddenly come into existence. Why has it such an extraordinary importance in one's life? Please, we're not saying it's right or wrong. We are not advocating monastic life, which is equally absurd. The monk is tortured by his own sexual, biological urges as much as anyone else. Only when he has these urges, he takes up the Bible or looks at a picture, identifies and tries to forget himself. But he can't. He's burning there in his isolation, as you in your relationships. So we're not saying you must not have sex, but we're trying to understand this thing which has become an extraordinary issue in life. Why? Because apparently love and sex go together. Why? Why? Sex, the act, the pleasure, the picture, the remembrances, the demand for it tomorrow. Why has this thing overpowered the mind? I do not know if you ever gone into it, if you ever thought about it even. We say it is an urge and it must be fulfilled, or it must be controlled, suppressed, or indulged. And when one observes this phenomena right throughout the world, one asks, why has it become such colossal importance? When there is no freedom intellectually, when there is no freedom in your daily activities, when everything is controlled, shaped, when society says, do this, don't do that, be moral, which obviously is no morality at all. When we are living second-hand, all round, the books we read, the literature, the pictures, the articles, all second-hand. And we are second-hand human beings. We repeat what others tell us to repeat. We think we are very clever if we can quote books, or if we are very, very erudite. How extraordinarily important to be intellectual, which means spinning a lot of theories, words, and held all round, bound. There is only one thing in which we can be free: eating and sex. And when every other thing is freed, when you're no longer a second-hand human being repeating what somebody else says, when there's complete freedom, which means no fear, intellectually, morally, virtuously, when you're not become a specialist in any field, but a human being, free, then sex has its own place, its own beauty. That's one of the major reasons why sex has become so extraordinarily important. Because we are stale, dead human beings everywhere else. And that is called love. And when you observe what is called love, in it there is pain, jealousy, anxiety. It's a torture that is to be loved and to love. Please do observe this in yourself. If you are not loved, you feel lost. You want a companion. You can't be alone at any time. When you do go out for a walk in the woods or on a pavement of a street, you are going with all the knowledge of the sayings of others in your head or in your heart. You are never completely alone. And there is great beauty, great depth in aloneness. When you are not carrying the memory of 1,000 yesterdays with all their experience, with all their knowledge and the information which has been poured into us. When you are no longer a Christian, a Buddhist, a monk, a businessman, a nothing. When you are really alone. Then perhaps you'll know what love is. But surely the thing that we call love isn't love. Is love pleasure? Is love attachment? And therefore fear? Is love something to be cultivated, a memory? And that's what we call love. And then there is this problem of dying, which is part of our life. The dying, the loving, and the living. The three are not separate. I don't live there, love there, and die. It's one movement of life. Non-fragmented, but whole, complete. And so what is this thing that one is so frightened about? In that is involved old age. You know how extraordinary it is that we can never die beautifully. You don't know if you ever watched an autumn leaf falling from a tree to the ground. The beautiful color, the exquisite movement as it comes down from the tree, fluttering. But we, through accident, through disease, die, fearful, anxious, crippled. You know, you have seen people who are dying with ugly faces, not as thing of beauty in their life or in their face. When they grow old, and old age shows on their face the way they have lived. So there is this phenomena of old age. Because we all want to remain young. Youth, apparently as it is now, is the most extraordinary thing to have. What does youth mean? Not merely in age, but what does it actually mean inwardly? To be innocent, decisive, unconfused, full of ecstasy, not pleasure. Pleasure and ecstasy are not the same thing. With infinite curiosity, be free to look at the skies and play with the trees. That's what youth means, not long hair, short hair, hippies, beatniks, and all the rest of it. It means innocency. But that innocency is not possible when we carry the whole of our life with all its memories, its despairs and anxieties, till the very last moment. Youth or innocence is only possible when you put aside all those memories every day, so that you are fresh every day, young every day. And that is possible, not impossible. So that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you are a fresh human being. Because you yesterday and tomorrow do not exist psychologically. In that there is innocency. And also one asks, in dying, if there is such thing as immortality. I wonder what that word means. To be beyond the mortal. Mortality, that is man. Can you live immortally, endlessly, eternally? So you have to find out what is the you that wants to live everlastingly. You with your petty little mind, little worries, prejudices, the Frenchman, the Englishman, with a little bank account, the identification with your furniture, with your house, with a little job. You say, no, I don't want that. That's not immortality. The soul is immortal. What does that word mean? How do you know it exists? Who has told you about it? You are conditioned to believe in the soul. Allah is not conditioned to believe in the soul. So when you are seeking immortality, you are seeking the perpetuation of yourself, and that yourself is so small, for God's sake. So utterly meaningless. A lot of words, memories put together is you. But when you drop all that, when you have no self-centered activity, when there is no me and you, then in that there is immortality. That doesn't lie on the other side of death. It is this side of death. And what is this dying? The physical organism, by constant usage or misusage, eating wrongly, living wrongly, disease, must come to an end. May live 1,000 years, 100 years or more, but it must come to an end like any other organism. We know that. That, I think, more or less everyone accepts it. That is inevitable. What we are frightened about, something else, which is the psychological ending. The me not continuing. That's what we are frightened about. The me with its worries, with its problems. The me with its, my children, my husband, my wife, my God, my belief, my nation, my leader, my guru. Psychologically, that's what we are afraid to lose. Fear, frightened to lose the known. Mustn't you lose the known? Mustn't you be free of the known? Otherwise, the mind can never be fresh, young, innocent, new. Then it can't see anything originally. So dying, in the deep sense of that word, is living. So when we understand this dying, loving, living as a whole movement, not three separate things, then life, action, is in relation to all of that. Its action then is not separate. Then action is part of living, loving, and dying. It isn't something that is born of an idea or a concept or a formula. Then such action is a conflict. Such action is fragmentary and therefore contradictory. Whereas when there is an understanding of this whole movement, with all its beauty, its silence, its ecstasy, then action is the living, the loving, and the dying. Maintenant, do you want to ask any questions? Yeah.
How difficult it is to reach that space.
Yeah. You spoke in one of your books the space between two thoughts. Would you explain it, go into it? Is that very important? Huh? We'll go into it in a minute. But is that what you're really, after hearing this morning's talk, you're asking that question? You pick up one idea and want to know what that little idea is. It's a strange world, isn't it? There's the whole stream and the river of life at which you have to drink, and you take a little cup, broken cup, and drink from it. Don't you? No, you've said, if you have observed yourself, that there is space between two thoughts. Haven't you noticed it? You think of one thing, and a little second later, you think of another. There is a little space between the two. You can watch it. You can see it in yourself. You are saying something to your friend, chattering away. You stop, and a moment later or a second later, talk about something else. But I'm sure you don't quite mean that. That's fairly simple. But we're talking probably about space. Not only the space between two thoughts, but the space that's much more important, much more interesting to find out what space is. The space between you and another, physically. The space between you and the thing you observe, whether it be a cloud or the tree or the river or the child or that woman passing by. And in that space between you and another, there is always the center, you and the center of another. Please do observe. It's quite amusing, this. And if you go into it, you'll see how extraordinarily serious it becomes. There is the center as you and the center of another, which is himself. So between you, the center, and the other, with his center, there is a space. There is space between you and the thing you observe as the tree, the cloud, and so on. In this space, as you observe it, there is always a border. There is always a limitation. Right? Do watch it. Watch me and yourself. Watch the speaker and you will find out. When you are looking at the speaker, you are looking at him with your prejudices, with your conclusions, with your hopes, inspiration, all the thing that goes to create the image about the speaker and the image you have about yourself. So between you, with your image, and the speaker, there is a space. As there is a space between you and the tree. When you look at that tree, say that's a pear tree. How lovely, how beautiful, how full of spring flowers it is. You are not actually looking at it. You have all the image, the pictures, the associations, the smell, and therefore you are not actually looking. You're looking through the screen of your thought, of your knowledge, of your experience. So that space is always limited. Right? And as long as there is division between you and the other, there must be conflict. You as the observer and the thing observed, whether it is in yourself or outside you. As long as there is a division between you and the thing you observe in yourself, there is space, and as long as there is that space, there must be contradiction, and therefore there must be conflict, effort to overcome that conflict, struggle, and so on. And what takes place when there is no image at all? When you observe that tree and there is no observer with all his knowledge, information, conclusion, belief, like and dislike, what actually takes place? You know, those who have taken drugs say that the space disappears between you and the thing you observe. And therefore, you're very intimate, you're very close. You see everything, intensely. The colors become extraordinarily vivid. The thing, the shape of the trunk with all the breaks in it becomes extraordinarily beautiful. At least that's what they say, which is a chemical effect which soon wears off, and you are back again with your separation. Therefore, to have again that feeling, you have to take again another dose of that stuff. So you become a slave to it. So is there a way, not merely, not chemically, not through drugs, is there a way of looking, hearing, seeing, listening, in which there is no center and therefore no limitation, so that you look, so there is an observation so complete so completely attentive that the space disappears, but you don't become the tree. That would be too absurd. You can't identify yourself with the tree. That's a trick. And that's a deadly trick. Then you become the tree. Then you might just as well be dead. But when you observe so completely, with complete attention, in which there is no observer at all, then what takes place? Then the very thing which the chemical thing has done becomes such a shoddy little affair. It's a childish thing. Then there is a quality, an ecstasy, a beauty in which, when the observer is not, is so complete, so vital, so immense. And that is in that there is infinite space. Yes, sir.
Love, hate, aggressivity, and fear, aren't these parts of human nature?
Isn't love, hate, aggressiveness part of human nature? And therefore to be kept as a privileged thing reserved for only the human beings? Why is it that we hate? Why is it that we are aggressive? The professionals, the specialists say, please, here, let me assure you, I will talk to the specialists. We have talked about with the specialists. I don't read books, thank God. They say aggressiveness is part of the animal inheritance. If you watch the animals or the chickens in the yard, you'll see how aggressive they are. One pecking against the other and so on. The pecking order. We have that aggressiveness is inherited from the animal. That's what they say. And therefore it's part of us. And there are the whole group of other people who say this aggressiveness is the result of the society in which we live. And that is also part of our human nature. Whatever the reason, whether it's the animal or the social inheritance, the fact is that we are aggressive. Resisting, fighting, dominating, violent, hating, which is part of us. And which breeds wars, nationalities, separateness, me and mine, you and yours. We accept this as part of existence, which is we accept war as a way of life. And if you want to live at peace, you can't have that. So you have to not choose. A man who chooses between the two is the most confused human being. When there is choice, there is confusion. But when you see things very clearly, there is no choice. Therefore, the mind is not confused. When you see very clearly what aggression, hate, which is part of the human structure, does in the world of action, in the world of living, in the world of so-called loving, what it does, actually observe it. Then you go either that way or the other way. There is no choice. If you want to live at peace, you live peacefully. Not with aggression. But you say, can one live in this world among wolves? Human beings whose part of their nature is aggressiveness, hate. Can a peaceful human being live? Find out. You can find out. You can live peacefully. Completely peacefully. Without any resistance. Because to live peacefully, you must be free. Free from aggression, which is a totally different state. And is the most intelligent state. And an intelligent man can live amongst the unintelligent. Finito. Finished.